残酷な天使のように少年よ神話になれ
Okay, let's go.
I picked this subject because of a personal interest in books, which made me realize that Japanese literature is not widely read in the West, and that me and my friends often get condescending comments for doing so. I wanted to know why. This eventually led me to take a closer look at the questions how Westernization has influenced Japanese media and how we perceive it today.
Let me see! Oh wait, I can't read.
Okay, so first of all, Japanese literature is defined as written works by Japanese authors in either Japanese or Classic Chinese. The Eurocentric view is the point of view of European people, focusing only on their needs and importance, and it takes part in the Western view. And lastly, Westernization, which is the process of non-Western European countries adopting characteristically Western customs and institutions, which can cause local customs and values to be undermined. This is not to be confused with modernization, which is the technological improvement and change of society, and can occur without the West's interference.
Good God, why are we only using weapons from Japan's Edo period?
Hey! The Edo period was badass, and you know it!
Damn it, you're right.
So the oldest Japanese texts, dating back to 400 CE, are still written in Classic Chinese, because the Japanese wanted to write, but had no writing system of their own. This carried on for about 1200 years, which meant that scholars had to learn both languages, and that Chinese culture heavily influenced early Japanese literature. The Tale of Genji, which is often called the world's first novel, was written during this time. Other notable periods include the Kamakura period of samurai warfare and the famous last Edo period of peace and fiction. During Edo times, Japan closed itself off completely for over 250 years, allowing its culture to develop with minimal outside influences. This changed with the Meiji Restoration, when the British saw what Japan was doing and were like, "Nuh-uh," and forced them to open up. To avoid being colonized, Japan adopted Western politics and culture very quickly, leading to an internal fight in Japanese culture between assimilating to Western standards or attempting to save as much of Japan's traditions as possible. It is impossible to capture the intertextual meaning and subtext unique to each language that cannot simply be shifted to another, but good translation is vital to the text's receival. A word-to-word translation between Japanese and English would make no sense, as the meaning of a word is difficult to convey if the target language has no counterpart and both languages have a very different grammar. Japanese is a heavily contextualized language and in possession of layers of formality and hidden meanings that English never had, and therefore cannot begin to display in a translation. Yet the content of the text cannot be altered too much, but the way in which it is conveyed must still feel familiar to the audience. Should that not be the case, the feeling of distance between text and reader is enhanced, feeding into the subconscious othering of something unfamiliar. Due to difficulty translating between the two languages, accompanied by lacking interest from Western audiences, few Japanese novels have been translated into English, although many English works have found their way into the Japanese literary canon.
What happened to the original plot of the movie?
The traditional Japanese plot structure is called Kisho Tenketsu and consists of 4 acts instead of 3 or 5. It introduces completely new information for the climax, called Ten, instead of giving us a big reveal and connecting previously acquired information like the Western plot structure does. Additionally, the conflict is usually character internal or about a character, instead of character versus the world. Fuck! Jesus. Japanese culture has influenced Japanese literature through Buddhism, a different view on life and death, and a different social structure compared to Western cultures. Symbolism differs quite a lot between the two cultures, making it difficult to understand metaphors and subtexts.
Which was more culturally significant, the Renaissance or Single Ladies by Beyoncé?
There's a difference between high and low culture. The former is attributed to artistic, aesthetic works of academic value that have lasted through time, while the latter is used to describe works of fiction serving purely entertaining purposes, lacking social commentary. Othering describes the act of singling out someone from a group as if they were different or inferior from the dominant social group. As a direct result of colonialism, the relationship between the West and Japan is imbalanced. Consequently, literature has been viewed through a very Eurocentric lens. Works that do not fit into the Eurocentric literary canon are criticized and dismissed, applying othering. An individual growing up in the West is usually taught the Eurocentric point of view, learning to subconsciously other different perspectives and cultures, thereby denouncing them and giving them less recognition.
Wait, so you only hate gay people because someone else told you to?
Why else would I?
This plays part in many Western readers struggling to read Japanese literature due to being confronted with a different perspective. It has been denounced and reduced to stereotypes, enhancing the feeling of inferiority in the Western view. Especially in high Japanese literature, cultural aspects are more prominent, increasing the feeling of otherness. Even when combining Western and Japanese culture, Japanese literature is not valued in the Western academic world, but it does gain more recognition in the West. Mine has been the life of much shame. I can't even guess myself what it must be to live the life of a normal human being. Is the first line of the novel No Longer Human, written by Osamu Dazai, talking about depression, struggle fitting in, and existentialism. The protagonist Yozo recollects his life, going into depth about a distant relationship with his family and the comedic mask he is desperately trying to put on, constantly haunted by the fear of someone seeing his true emotions. He begins actively destroying his own life and that of the people around him. Especially enhancing this behavior are the two suicide attempts. The first, a lover's suicide, with the hostess, ends with only her drowning and Yozo surviving. For his second attempt, he steals pills from his pharmacist's girlfriend, surviving again. Eventually, Yozo finds his path and begins to recover, working as a writer. Key aspects like family, lovers, and struggles have been taken from the author's life, but where Yozo keeps living, Dazai commits double suicide with his wife. No Longer Human is widely regarded as one of the first literary works to combine Japanese and Western aspects as equals. It's a biography typical for the Japanese novel, very character-focused and follows Kisho Tenketsu. At the same time, it deals with the Western-originated existentialism and is split into 3 acts. While there is a lover's suicide, there's also plenty of references to Western culture. This new writing style was essential for Dazai to be read by Western audiences, but he faced heavy criticism from Western readers for Japanese aspects and vice versa. Many authors attempted to walk a fine line between assimilating Western culture just enough to avoid the constant threat of colonization by becoming what was deemed a nation of equal footing to the West, yet retaining as much of Japanese culture as possible.
Don't fuck with me! I have the power of God and anime on my side!
Consequently, most contemporary Japanese literature contains Western influences. But cultural exchange goes both ways. Although slowly, Western pop culture has begun adopting Japanese influences, resulting in multicultural products. Anime and manga are a great example of this. They have a growing audience in most recent generations, despite following Kisho Tenketsu and depicting Japanese culture. Despite being shunned as low literature, no matter the content, as well as having unfamiliar graphics and plot, the subculture has begun significantly influencing teenagers.
Kurapika is now drowning in an indescribable emptiness.
Due to this rising demand, anime and manga are more often translated than classic works, although it is not uncommon for the translation to be altered to fit Western ideals and images to raise sales. Especially voiceovers can be very free sometimes.
Drag queens won't bother you. Worry about priests. Leave me alone! It's Marilyn Manson! Catch Satoru! Have you done your homework yet? Oh wait, you're dyslexic. Done your homework, Cav? You, I'm Answer. Hey, talking, me too.
These stories have managed to win over the Western media market because, as a product of Westernization, the references to Japanese culture have been removed, instead being replaced by references to Western culture, therefore making them more familiar.
I'm just like you. I'm just like you. You're just like me. You're just like me.
Ironically, this creates the conundrum that manga and anime are viewed as a symbol of Japan, while in actuality being remote from Japanese culture. Although some degree of otherness remains, the prominent argument against Japanese literature as being too culturally different for Western audiences to like has little support in the case for works written after the start of Westernization. The remaining resentment can be attributed to othering. Younger generations are more likely to be fans as they tend to other at a decreasing rate. This doesn't mean that they're free from othering because the stories they like have still undergone Western change, in some cases specifically to make them more marketable to Western audiences. Many manga and anime have taken inspiration from classic literature, encouraging the interest of younger generations in older works. A well-known example is Bungo Stray Dogs by Kafka Asagiri and Sango Harukawa, animated by Bones. Japan's, America's, and Europe's most famous writers have been given superhuman abilities, solving or causing crimes. While the name remains the same, the character's ability and personality directly reference the author's most famous work. For example, the protagonist Nakajima Atsushi gets his ability from the novel The Moon Over the Mountain, which is about a man-eating tiger, allowing him to turn into a furry. Bungo takes a lot of creative liberty.
Now get up. Why are you acting like some kind of damsel in distress? You're a were-tiger. Grow some were-balls.
But the Bungo Stray Dog character's experiences and relationships reference key events in the novels and in the author's life. This connection has drawn attention from all across the globe to old classics. It's one example of how manga and anime have helped contribute to the recognition of Japanese literature in the West. Within the Eurocentric view of literature, manga and anime are regarded as low, no matter their content, despite having experienced far more Westernization than high culture, meaning they are of even less value to the West, despite being more readily accepted. Now before we wrap this up, I'm going to do the credits because I know y'all will not watch them otherwise.
Everywhere you look, everywhere there's a heart, a hand to hold on to. Everywhere you look, everywhere there's a face of somebody who needs you. Everywhere you look, when you're lost out there and you're all alone, life is waiting to carry you home.
After long hours of dedicated research and consulting with the horrors, I've come to the conclusion that the differences between Japanese and Western literature, such as language, quality of translation, narrative structure, and culture, may feel unfamiliar and create a feeling of otherness. Although the cultural aspects within Japanese literature have declined since the beginning of Westernization and been replaced by Western culture, othering keeps opinion of Japanese literature low, as many Western readers subconsciously denounce it. Westernized works gain more attention in the West, but are not seen as equals. This is heavily reflected in the reception of Dazai's No Longer Human. Westernization has changed the perception of Japanese literature in such a way that works heavily influenced by the West are slowly gaining more popularity, as shown with the example of manga and anime, which contributes to the classic literary works they're based on slowly gaining more recognition by Western audiences. Due to the increased display of culture in Japanese high literature, they are accepted more slowly.